When I say Russell Westbrook, Perk, what do you say?
Lesser role is what I think. When I think of Russell Westbrook, I think of, losing himself in the team. And I'm listening to what Mark said, and he said, Darvin Ham is saying he has a plan, and Darvin Ham is supporting Russell Westbrook. Darvin Ham's supposed to do that. Darvin Ham's supposed to support Russ in case the Lakers have to bring him back to let him know, I got your back. And then I heard what Dave said. Dave said behind the scenes, Rob Pelinka is actually still out there making phone calls and looking for trades that might include Russell Westbrook, which is for the betterment of the team, is what Rob Pelinka's supposed to do. But again, I go back and I'm going to state this. Russell Westbrook has to make sure he holds Russell Westbrook accountable. If you're going to have Darvin Ham go out on the limb and say that he supports you 100%, Russell Westbrook has to do the same. Russell Westbrook has to make sure that he's in the gym with Phil Handy, who's one of the best player development coaches around. Russell Westbrook has to make sure he's getting extra shots up. Russell Westbrook has to make sure he's actually doing his part on the defensive end, fighting to get up over screens, sprinting back in transition to get back on defense. Russell Westbrook has to hold Russell Westbrook accountable. And last year, what I saw out of Russell Westbrook was a lot of finger pointing instead at himself when he struggled throughout the course of the season.
He certainly, you could put him in that category, but the question is, okay, is he going to set screens defensively? He said he wants to get back to being an all-defensive player. Well, back is an interesting word in all of that. So, Dave, Ham is saying all of the right things about coaching Russ. I'm a big, big fan of Darvin Ham's, but what is the latest on trade talks surrounding Russ?
Well, while Darvin Ham has told Mark these plans for Russell Westbrook, and he told our friends at Showtime these plans for Russell Westbrook behind the scenes, Lakers general manager and president of pro basketball personnel, Rob Pelinka, has been making phone calls to teams about trying to trade Russell Westbrook out of town. Now, the latest intelligence I have is that things have not moved in terms of the Brooklyn front. There is no traction on a deal that would involve sending Russell Westbrook out and bringing Kyrie Irving in. One thing I have learned over the last day or two, tangentially, that there has been some talks re-engaged between the Lakers and the Indiana Pacers. Now, that would center around a Buddy Hield deal and could be a deal that would include Russell Westbrook if you're talking about also having Miles Turner in that deal. Or perhaps it could be a secondary move where you would be talking about Taylor Horton-Tucker type of package to try to get Buddy Hield.
Interesting.
And so we could see whether that would affect.
Nation, welcome in. Trevor Lane here for LakersNation.com, your home for everything Lakers. Russell Westbrook, can he actually fit with the Lakers next season? I know. Most of you are probably screaming no at your screens right now. Understandable. Last season was an absolute disaster for the Lakers, and Russell Westbrook was right in the thick of it. Still don't think it's 100% his fault, but certainly not 0% either. But new head coach Darvin Ham seems to believe that he can make things work where Frank Vogel couldn't last season. In fact, he detailed what his plan is, and I want to get into that. But first, quick reminder, do subscribe right here to the Lakers Nation YouTube channel. Ring the notification bell as well. All right, so Darvin Ham appeared on Vince Carter's show, appropriately named The Vince Carter Show, and he was explaining what he's going to do to make Russell Westbrook fit with this roster. Now, before I dive into that, though, really quick, just as an aside here, Rasheed Wallace, Darvin Ham just very briefly in passing mentioned that the Lakers actually still have one more spot on their coaching staff and that they're working on bringing in Rasheed Wallace. I know a lot of people have been asking. We had heard that Rasheed Wallace was going to become an assistant coach with the Lakers. Didn't happen. We thought that was dead and gone. And then here we go. Darvin Ham mentions that he still has another spot on his staff, and they're working on bringing in Rasheed Wallace, though he did say there were other candidates as well. So nothing that's done, but it's not dead either. So just wanted to note that. But Russell Westbrook. So Darvin Ham says that Russell Westbrook is getting too much of the blame. Seems like he kind of feels bad for him in that regard, believes he is still a good basketball player. And in terms of how he hopes to use him, now again, the Lakers, they are trying to trade Russell Westbrook, whether they work something out ultimately with the Brooklyn Nets, if it's a 3-team trade that sends Russ to the Spurs, to the Pacers, wherever, they're trying to figure out a way to trade him. But that's Rob Pelinka's job. That's on Rob Pelinka. Darvin Ham is preparing to make the pieces that he has right now work in his offense for next season. And if those pieces change, well, that's on the front office to do those things. So if Russell Westbrook is still a Laker, Darvin Ham referenced Drew Holiday in terms of how he plans to use Russell Westbrook. Now, I know those two guys, a little bit of a head scratcher. They are not that similar as players. Russell Westbrook, not known as a good defender. Drew Holiday is one of, if not the best defensive point guards in the NBA. And Drew Holiday also shoots league average, if not a little bit better from three. So he typically shoots it well. He shot 36% from three last season. So he shoots well enough to where teams care about him if he's behind the three-point line. The same is not true of Russell Westbrook. So not a like-for-like comparison there, but Darvin Ham may have just been comparing Drew to Russ in terms of fitting in with two other star players, right? In Milwaukee, he was fitting Drew in with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton. Here, fitting Russell Westbrook in with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. We do know that some of the systems that we saw in Milwaukee are going to get transferred over to LA, including the 4-out offense. I'm going to talk more about that in just a moment. But Ham also noted that Russell Westbrook came to himself, Rob Pelinka, and Jeannie Buss and said this. Now, at first, that raised my eyebrows. I thought, did they have a meeting? Or was this perhaps just at the introductory press conference? He didn't specify there, but apparently, Russell Westbrook told all three of them that he was going to be a tyrant on defense. This is what Darvin Ham said. Russ had told him, a total pit bull. And he said, so I'm going to hold him to that. Now, Russell Westbrook hasn't been a good defensive player in some time. In fact, he was a very, very poor defensive player last season, got blown by at the point of attack constantly, really struggled off ball, got backdoor cut every single game. It felt like he really struggled on the defensive end of the floor. Good defensive rebounder. That's about it. And so here's Russ promising to Darvin Ham that he is going to do these things defensively, that he is going to be a point of attack defender. And that is where Darvin Ham is really starting things with Russell Westbrook. He wants him to be that on the defensive side of the ball. He wants him to focus most of his energy and most of his attention there. Now, we've heard that in previous interviews, so that's nothing new, but Darvin Ham is expecting Russell Westbrook to be an incredible point of attack defender for the Los Angeles Lakers. And again, we haven't seen Russell Westbrook be that in quite some time. But on the offensive end, this is what Darvin Ham spoke about. He talked about using him in the dunker spot, using him as a slasher, playing out of the dunker spot quite a bit. So that means kind of floating along the baseline when the ball is up top, hoping to lose the attention of the defense and then drop into the correct position for a drop-off pass to finish. That's what Russell Westbrook is going to do, according to Darvin Ham. He also said, and I quote, I want him to shoot the most corner threes he's ever shot in his career. Now, we know that Russell Westbrook is not a good three-point shooter. Teams completely ignore him behind the three-point line. However, Darvin Ham did take note of the fact that Russell Westbrook is not bad, or at least statistically was not terrible as a corner three shooter. Doesn't shoot a lot of them, though. Darvin Ham says we need a lot more of those from you. Specifically talked about Russell Westbrook getting out in transition and not worrying about bringing the ball up. Instead, saying that if Russell Westbrook is out in front after a defensive possession, he just needs to go to get into a corner and let his teammates bring the ball up. Now, reportedly, last season, that was a problem with Frank Vogel and Russell Westbrook, where Russ was not willing to let other people bring the ball up. He took the mentality of, or the approach of, I'm the point guard. This is what I do. I bring the ball up the floor. And so he would constantly go to get the ball from someone else. Darvin Ham is telling Russell Westbrook, no, we've got other guys who can bring the ball up. If they get the rebound, we want to get out and run. What you need to do is go and fill the corners and be willing to shoot that corner three. If you watch the Milwaukee Bucks offense, that's a big part of it. Get out, and it's not just their offense, a lot of offenses in the NBA, but you get out in transition and you run to the corners, which is the shortest three-point shot on the floor, in order to space out the defense and give yourselves some open looks either there, or if the defense commits to the corners, you can get some open looks in the paint. So that's what Darvin Ham is expecting Russell Westbrook to do on that end of the floor, particularly in transition. Not worry so much about securing the rebound, not worry so much about being the guy to bring the ball up the floor, but instead, at the right moments, be willing to go without the ball, run up the floor, and at least draw a defender with you. If not, get yourself in a position to knock down the open corner three. Now, what Ham believes is that this will ultimately lengthen Russell Westbrook's career, which is interesting because we've been talking about this on our LakersNation.com podcast. We've been talking about what happens to Russell Westbrook after this season. Yes, he's making $47 million this season, But if he is still seen at the conclusion of this season as a guy, whether he's a Laker or not, as a player who can't fit into the modern NBA, who can't adjust his game, who is more in the line of Allen Iverson, who wasn't able to adjust his game compared to a Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard, Vince Carter, any of these stars who were able to transition into being role players in the later stages of his career. If he's not able to do that, what does the future past this contract look like for Russell Westbrook? Well, Darvin Ham says he's trying to tell Russ that impacting the game in its totality, not just with the ball in your hands, is going to diversify your attack, and it's going to extend an already illustrious career. So clearly, Russ has got to be thinking about what life is going to look like after the conclusion of this contract, about what his market value is going to be. Now, Jovan Buha of The Athletic has not painted a picture of Russell Westbrook as being very self-aware in terms of his current standing in the NBA, or understanding the fact that if he is traded somewhere, almost certainly that team is going to buy him out. There aren't teams out there that want to be in the business of giving Russell Westbrook the ball as their starting point guard. And so his job this season has got to be to change that impression of him, to change the narrative surrounding him and his career. So that is going to be important for him. And according to Darvin Ham, he can do it if he follows along with what Darvin Ham is saying in terms of his offensive role, being a cutter, being somebody who's willing to set screens. By the way, there's some stats that have been floating around from Dave McMenamin of ESPN, which are absolutely horrific when you look at how many screens Russell Westbrook actually set this season. Does not paint a good picture, which brings me to my final point here. All this stuff that Darvin Ham is saying, most of it is not new. Now, asking Russell Westbrook to shoot more corner threes than at any point in his career, okay, that might be a little bit new there, but Frank Vogel said a lot of this stuff too. These are things that we've been saying about Russell Westbrook for years now, and it's never come to fruition. Russell Westbrook has stuck with doing the same stuff he has always done. And let's be fair, Russ, he got to this point to being an extremely successful player, a top 75 all-time player, a first ballot Hall of Famer, an MVP, averaging triple doubles, all of this stuff. He was incredibly successful doing all the things that he's been doing for his entire life. And so to suddenly tell him that what you've always done is not what you're allowed to do anymore, and you have to completely change your playing style, that's not going to be easy. And so in that way, I think I can sympathize with Russell Westbrook a little bit, but that's also what the Lakers need him to do, to change his playing style if he's going to be on this roster and successful. I look at the things that Darvin Ham is saying and compare it more to like the style of play of a Bruce Brown, almost a guard version of a Draymond Green, someone like that. That's kind of what the Lakers are envisioning for Russell Westbrook, not being that guy that has the ball in his hands every possession and just runs high screen and roll with the offense spread and no center on the floor, so he's as much spacing as possible. The Lakers made it very clear with their roster choices that they are not catering to what is best for Russell Westbrook, but instead they're going to do what's best for the team. And if he's around next season, it's going to be on Darvin Ham and, more importantly, on Russell Westbrook to figure out a way to make it work. I've been saying all along, I'm skeptical. Look, Darvin Ham's plan, if anything is going to work with Russell Westbrook, it's this plan that Darvin Ham is presenting. The problem is we've never seen it. We've been talking about this for a while, and we've never seen even really flashes to give us hope that Russell Westbrook can be the player that Darvin Ham is asking him to be and envisioning him to be. Look, until we see it on the floor, I'm going to be skeptical and assume that it's not going to work out that way, that ultimately Russ is not going to be willing to play that way. I hope I'm wrong. If he's a Laker next season, I hope we do see this. But until it actually is taking place on the floor, until we see him adopting this role and focusing on defense and doing all these things off the ball, I'm going to be skeptical that it's actually